rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is American Perspective with your host, the charming, the debonair, the dashing Rick Thomas, right here. That's me. Anyway, hello, everybody. I hope you guys have all had a wonderful start to your weekend. And I am very glad that you are here. This is just, again, this is just another moment for us to get together and for me to put out some information, some knowledge, and some incredibly factual facts. Factual facts. That's like a double, that's not a double entendre, but that's, anyway. All right. Let me go ahead and get right into it. Let's get started with tonight's Pledge of Allegiance. And just as a precursor, this is going to be Coco Dominky, Cam, and Sean. Coco Dominky is over on Rumble. She's one of my faithful followers. And she submitted the Pledge of Allegiance a while back. But I just want to let everyone know that Sean is autistic. And is mostly nonverbal. So the fact that he even speaks on this kind of is really, really cool. Okay. And apparently that is one of his favorite things to do, is to do the Pledge of Allegiance. But he went ahead and made some sounds too. So don't freak. It's not a problem. He is just expressing himself in the way that he normally does. So without any further ado, for those of you who are of a mind, please stand, remove your hats, and join in while Coco, Cam, and Sean recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, I thank Coco and Cam and Sean for giving us that wonderful Pledge of Allegiance. You guys can all submit your pledges. If you are of a mind to, go ahead and record yourself or someone else saying the Pledge of Allegiance, however you want to do it. And you can submit that to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. And you could submit Pet of the Week for Wednesday. You can submit Question of the Week, which we have one for tonight, and it's a historical question. It's a little bit about history. We're going to cover a little bit about history tonight with that. That's at the end of the program, but you also can put forth your Pledge of Allegiance as well at that location. Okay, so tonight, I don't know if anybody caught Wednesday's program, but Wednesday I was gifted by the Whiskey Warriors this Wild Turkey 101, this bottle of Wild Turkey. So we're going to go ahead and open it. You can see that the thing is still sealed, so I'm going to go ahead and open it here on the air. See if I can actually get I can get the seal broken with just my fingernail, which is cool. And we're going to go ahead and pop this little bugger open. I don't know if anybody heard that, but we're going to pour this into our We the People Lucky Shot USA. Rocks glass, there we go. Putting that in. Here we go. First taste. I haven't had Wild Turkey, so this is going to be cool. But there it is, the We the People Lucky Shot USA glass, you can get those at luckyshotUSA.com. You can pick that up and a bunch of others too. They not only have the We the People, but they have a bunch of others. And there's my whiskey stones in the bottom. So let's just give it a shot here. Okay, that's pretty good. I think it's smooth. At the tail end of the finish, that is really good. So that's what we're going to be drinking tonight. Okay, so let's go ahead and get on over to tonight's premium sponsor, which is the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission. That's to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined. Ooh, my mouth is watering. As defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up, and while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online, or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, head on over to constitution.americanperspective.online. Check this thing out. It is a pocket-sized U.S. Constitution with 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather. Inside, the pages are tear-resistant and water-resistant. And check out that binding. They stitched the binding all the way through the leather. It has got rounded corners so you don't catch it on your pocket when you stick it in there. It is buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy the kid from the Outlaw Dogs tasted Billy approved, and my youngest whiskey warrior, which I would love to hear from that family sometime in the near future. But my youngest whiskey warrior has passed his civics badge in Scouts using the very accurate information that is contained within these leather-bound pages. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online. That's constitution.americanperspective.online to pick yours up today. And also, do me a favor and go and check out the IOTC, the Institute on the Constitution, as well. And I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate of theirs. Okay. So tonight is, of course, wait just a second. I got to catch up here. I got to move this out of the way. Okay. Trying to operate the computer all at the same time. Anyway, let's move on to our segment, which is a fan favorite also. Let's go on to today's On This Day in American History. And, of course, during the On This Day in American History, we read from the book, The American Patriot's Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. It is chock full. That is a thick book, folks. For you on audio, you really ought to head to Rumble and see how thick this thing is. This thing is so thick. But come on over and check it out at rumble.com, of course. But this is just a thick book filled with fascinating factoids and information about our America. And tonight, being April 20th, we're going to discuss how America got its name. America is named after the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci, one of the early explorers of the New World. Between 1497 and 1504, Vespucci made as many as 4 voyages across the Atlantic. He took part in expeditions that explored the coast of South America between Venezuela and southern Brazil. Christopher Columbus had already sailed across the Atlantic in 1492, but he believed that he had made landfall in Asia. Vespucci insisted in a report entitled Mundus Novus, meaning New World, that a giant uncharted landmass lay between Europe and Asia. In April 1507, a German mapmaker named Martin Waldseemüller published a book called Cosmographiae Introductio, in which he coined the term America to honor Vespucci. He mistakenly believed that Vespucci had been the first to discover the New World. Quote, I do not see why anyone should by right object to name it America, after its discoverer, Americus, a man of sagacious mind, since both Europe and Asia took their names from women. Waldseemüller wrote. Waldseemüller also made maps bearing the name America, and soon other Europeans began using the term. The name first applied only to South America, which Vespucci had explored, but later map makers used America for all of the New World. And that is tonight's On This Day in American History. Now, apparently, today is of a special day. Today is of a special day for those of you who participate in the plant smoking variety known as Mary Jane, if you're of my age, or there's some other names for it too. But here's the thing. Today is 420, and supposedly it's like some special day. I wouldn't know because, honestly, and this is the God's honest truth, I have never partaken in that. I prefer my vice of choice to be, of course, of the liquid variety. But that being the case, apparently 420 means a lot to some people for it. I honestly, I don't know, but it was enough apparently for the Democrats to kick off their social medias with all kinds of comments about all kinds of things about the wonderful plant that is there, whether it's cannabis and that kind of stuff. But apparently these people seem to think that you shouldn't be heading off to prison just for possessing the marijuana, and that according to Joe Biden, and let me go ahead and just show you here, because otherwise this is just not going to make any sense to anybody. Let's see. There it is. So I don't know if anybody can really see this. It's probably a little small, but he's saying, quote, no one should be jailed just for using or possessing marijuana, according to President Joe Biden. And while he is not, obviously he's the leader of the Democrat Party, which is sad to say at best. But not only that, but his second in command, Kamala Harris, mirrored him. Nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed, she says. We must continue to change our nation's approach to marijuana while reforming the justice system so it finally lives up to its name. Well, folks, there's only one problem with this. And it's really kind of obvious to anyone who has any semblance or knowledge or understanding of history. See, at one point, there was this guy that I know, most of you know him too. He spent, something like, 30, 40 years in the Senate. And during said time in the Senate, he stood up in front of the Senate and advocated for this wonderful thing that is today known as the 1994 crime bill. Now, in that crime bill, he advocated for a hard focus on crime. Who was that guy? Well, none other than the President of the United States today, Joe Biden. In fact, he advocated for it so hard that the Democrats during the 2020 primary hammered him on it. And Kamala Harris hammered him on it, which is really ironic, and I'll get to that in just a second. But here, just so you guys can listen really quickly here, I'm going to go ahead and play just a small portion of back then Senator Joseph R. Biden's advocation of the 1994 crime bill.
Back to the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street.
Okay, so they must be taken off the street. He apparently doesn't care, obviously, about what drove these individuals to actually do the things that they do. Now, keep in mind, this wasn't specifically about marijuana. However, as we know, looking backward in time, because of course, hindsight is always 2020. But we end up with this whole idea that all of a sudden after this crime bill passed, that a bunch of people, in particular, people of color, started getting arrested. And they started getting arrested for minor offenses, and they ended up going into prison and having plenty of prison time for just what would be considered minor offenses. Now, these people that they're pandering to, the ones that are the low IQ, low information, low short-term memory of the Democrat Party, these people seem to think that Joe Biden is on their side. Joe Biden is not on their side. Joe Biden cares about two things in this world, folks. He cares about two simple things. Number one that he cares about his 10%. And number two that he cares about is the Biden family name. He doesn't give two craps about anybody who is doing any kind of drug. And that's evidenced, obviously, by his son Hunter, who has been shown on pictures and video and all kinds of things smoking crack pipes, hanging out with prostitutes and other people. We won't necessarily go into that. But he only wants to keep the Biden family name, and he wants to keep the 10% of his money flowing to him. Now, what's sad is that these people, these Democrats, are not thinking about any of this stuff, because if they were, I'll be honest with you, if they were, they would have remembered the fact that he tried to run for president twice before, failed twice before, because we actually had a mainstream media that did their jobs, that would actually go out and root out the truth and present it to America, regardless of which side it fell on, but they'd present it to America, and they actually rooted him out about his plagiarism, about his lying, about his grades, about his lying, about his degrees, about his lying. Well, you could just end it right there, about his lying. So once again, we have Joe Biden taking advantage, sort of the particular date today in order to try and pander. And of course, cackling Kamala follows right along suit. Now, it's not just them, by the way. Many others all said the same thing. Many others of Congress, they're like a hive mind. They jump in and they start to, they just, and it isn't even like a trigger. It's sort of like they wake up in the morning and they wait for Joe Biden's account, because let's face it, it's likely not Joe Biden, but Joe Biden's account to put out the order of the day. And then for the rest of that 24-hour period, they sit there and mimic, regurgitate, reiterate, and any other kind of copying words and adjectives that you can use, and they spit it out onto the social media platforms. And everybody who is not intelligent enough to see the pandering that's going on, they just jump right in along with them. They just jump right in along with them. That actually even showed up in the fact that Kamala Harris, who, by the way, for those of you that have longer memories than just yesterday, used to be the prosecutor in California. Yeah, she actually was a lawyer. I still can't quite figure out how. Let's be honest, you listen to her speeches and they're so circular and logic in nature that I don't even think, the only thing that I can figure is that the judges are just as dumb and followed along and go like, yeah, that was smart. Yep. But she went ahead and jumped in, as I showed you. And what a lot of people don't understand with the wake of President Joe Biden's drug policy announcement, let's see, this was back in 2022, there was a drug policy announcement. Kamala Harris kept crowing about the Biden administration changing the federal government's approach to marijuana. And according to Harris, she says that the bottom line is there should nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed. Now, of course, all the people in the audience, or many people in the audience, would applaud for that kind of crap, because they are low information, low IQ voters. They're like sheep. They just follow along. But what they don't understand is that as she was in California as the Attorney General from 2011 to 2016, she put away over 1,900 people just for having marijuana. She sent them. And as a prosecutor in San Francisco prior to her Attorney General days, she helped ensure that people who may have been previously eligible for drug diversion programs were instead sent to prison. So she's now touting about, hey, we don't need to lock these people up. But she made the name for herself on the backs of that kind of thing. Now, there are some out there who are saying, well, she changed her mind. She took a step and she changed her mind and she became a new person. But you know what? None of these people become new people. They do only what they can in order to be elected again. And I'm not just simply talking about Democrats, although it's very, very, very blatantly obvious on the Democrat side. But even the Republicans do this too. Politicians as a whole are I kind of look at them as like car salesmen. They want your money. They want the sale. They want you to vote for them. That's the sale. That's the contract. And that's what they are looking for. Now, Kamala also was on a podcast or a show or something like that. She was asked about it. And she was asked whether or not she, partook of the drug as well. And she kind of laughed it off and said that, well, I'm Jamaican. What do you think? Well, if that wasn't a freaking stereotype, I have no idea what that would be. But she went ahead and said it anyway. I mean, again, she's trying to convert herself, which, politicians do. I mean, that's their job. Their job is to sell them to you so that you will vote for them. And this is pretty much how the entire world works right now. And it's sort of like, those of us who remember things like Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson came out, sounded like he was a stand-up guy and was going to be a good Speaker of the House. But he goes and changes his mind on stuff. So you can't sit here and look at these people, look at any politician. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, this doesn't apply to exactly everyone. However, the vast majority have demonstrated, especially the ones that have turned it into a career and have been there longer than 1 or 2 terms, have literally set the bar for the rest of them. And they are all in the same boat. What is going to get them elected again? And they will do this over and over and over again for votes. I was this many years old and just a little bit younger than this, but I seem to recall the Democratic debate attacks by Kamala Harris against Joe Biden and vice versa. And yet here they are, both on lockstep. Same thing, pandering for votes. No different than they did with the student loan payments, no different than what they have been doing about taxing the rich. Because let's face it, we need to, and this is them talking, we need to find a common enemy so that we can get people on our side. And so what do? They talk about taxing the rich, when I've shown in both the social medias as well as here on this program that taxing the rich really isn't what they say it is. And it's going to end up costing the people, the middle class folks, even worse. People need to wake up. And I think they are. I think they are starting to wake up. But I'm hoping and praying that it's going to be fast enough and complete enough that we will have a good election cycle this year in 2024. That's what I am hoping for, and that's what you should be hoping for too. All right. Real quick break here before I move on to the next topic. I wear these shirts, these wonderful America-themed shirts. And while I'll be honest, I'm not really getting anything for this, but you might be sitting there wondering, hey, this guy, he's wearing those sharp shirts, those fantastic shirts. In fact, those shirts are actually making him look better on camera than what he actually is in real life. You want to know how to get a shirt like this? Head on over to theflagshirt.com. That's The Flag Shirt, all one word, theflagshirt.com, and you yourself can pick up these fantastic American patriotized shirts that are just absolutely wonderful. I am wearing most of the ones that I wear. The only one that isn't is the flag shirt, I think. But the ones that I am wearing are the cotton polo shirts. I am very comfortable in them. I'm telling you, their sizes are right on. And it is just fantastic. You can just head on over to theflagshirt.com. That's theflagshirt.com. And in fact, I think they have a sale on some of the button-down shirts. Taking a look at some of those. But the cotton shirt polos, these are the ones that I like. And in fact, tonight, I'm wearing the Constitution-themed We the People shirt. Cotton polo. Head on over to theflagshirt.com. That's theflagshirt.com to go and get yours today. All right. So, while Trump is sitting in court, which, by the way, opening arguments start next week for Trump. For the Trump trial, which it's not a hush money trial. It's an NDA contract or non-disclosure agreement contract trial, regardless of the phrasing that the left want to use. Okay, but Joe Biden has actually come out of the basement and has gone on the road. In fact, he headed out to Scranton, Pennsylvania. You know, he's that Scranton kid, that fighting guy, fighting Scranton, Joe Biden. Even though most people don't really remember him from Scranton. But anyway, he headed off to Scranton and he made a speech. Now, the biggest buffoon and blunder, which is clearly and easily debunked, just like, just about anything the left says about Trump, is the fact that Joe's uncle, who was in World War II, not only piloted a plane, which I don't think he did that. In fact, I seem to recall that he didn't, but he ended up going down in the jungles of somewhere, and he was eaten by cannibals. No joke. No joke. This is what Biden said, is that it's not a joke, but his uncle was apparently killed and eaten by cannibals. I'm sorry. You see that, you look at the Robert Hur report, you see him every day where he has to be told where to go, even though he's been told where to go. But anyway, I'm sorry. But he gave a speech in Scranton, and that isn't even the worst of the worst for that speech. So here, Biden claimed that no one, and this is in hot air, by the way. They did kind of a fact check on his speech. So apparently he says, no one making $400,000 a year would pay more in taxes. And then, of course, he added, I hope you are all able to make $400,000. I never did. Okay, well, wait a minute. The president's salary actually is $400,000 a year. Also, Joe had some big years when he was out of office, thanks mostly to book sales. And for those of you on the audio program, I'm putting those book sales in quotes. I'm doing the air quote thing, which a lot of people don't like. But the reason being is because of the fact that his book sales were abysmal, although he made $500,000, reportedly, according to the IRS, made $500,000 for that. In 2017, apparently he and his wife made $11 million, according to tax returns. So he also made a claim about prescription drug spending, which had to be corrected. He said, for example, seniors beginning in 2024, no matter how much their prescription drug costs are, they'll never have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter what. Well, his claim is false in two ways. Number one is the $2,000 cap on Medicare Part D enrollees out-of-pocket out-of-pocket prescription drug spending takes effect in 2025, not 2024. There is a higher cap, more than $3,000, that's in place this year. The White House corrected the official transcript, of course. You know, they can't like say the truth. And second is that it's not true that seniors will never have to spend more than $2,000 per year, no matter what. The cap is indexed to annual inflation in Part D costs, so it's likely to be set higher than $2,000 in future years. Biden repeated his bogus claim once again about the taxes paid by millionaires. Now, they like to say that billionaires and, you know, so on and so forth, that they only pay like 8% tax. And that is entirely not true. It is entirely not true. Biden didn't explain that the figure that he used is the product of an alternate calculation. I wonder what those alternate calculations actually are. And from economists who in his own administration, that factors in unrealized capital gains that are not treated as taxable income under federal law. I'm going to add to that currently, because you know that they're going after it. So here's the thing, folks. When you're talking about taxes and paying taxes, you have things. Those things have value, but they only have value if you decide to sell them. One of them happens to be your home. So for an example, you purchase your home at $200,000, 20 years ago. You've been paying and paying and paying on it, and it goes up in value to $400,000. But you're not actually $200,000 richer, because you actually would have to sell the home in order to realize that, quote, capital gain. And so what again, low IQ, low information voters seem to think is that all these billionaires have all these things and they are able to, skirt on their taxes. But what they don't understand is a lot of that stuff, just like when Trump had to come up with that money for the bond, his money is not liquid. Most billionaires don't have liquid money. They don't have dollar bills or gold or silver or any other precious metals or diamonds just sitting around. And even then, it's a thing that would have to get sold in order to realize the gain on it. And so this is a common theme that the left uses in order to attempt to try and mislead you about billionaires not paying their taxes. They are paying their taxes. In fact, I have a meme that I've been tossing around on social media. They pay well over 50% of the actual taxes that are accrued in this country. They're the ones that are footing the majority of the bill for it. Let's see. He talked about the number of times that he visited Iraq and Afghanistan, when he actually, saying that he was thinking it was like 36, 38 times, when his own campaign said in 2019 that it was only 21. Yeah, so there was a bunch of lies, nothing unusual. He also made claims about China. He made claims about being the second youngest senator ever elected, about Trump wanting to cut Social Security, which he doesn't, about the jobs, which, he loves putting out 14 million, 15 million jobs gained. Well, what he neglects to tell you is about 10 to 11 million of those actually came from returning after the first ever economic shutdown in history. And so, yeah, there's just, This guy opens up his mouth and all he does is lie, lie, lie. I'm reminded of the Meghan Trainor. I believe it's Meghan Trainor who sings that piece. But anyway. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. Good call out there, Outlaw Dogs, on this. They also, whenever they put out the new jobs report, which, by the way, folks, I mean, I don't know if anybody ever watches those, but whenever they put out the new jobs report, the jobs reports basically state that the majority of these jobs are actually going to government jobs. They're not private sector jobs. And so what is happening is Biden is spending more money, which, of course, increases inflation, increases our debt, in order to pad the GDP, in order to pad the jobs reports and make it seem like the economy is looking good, but the economy itself is not looking all that great. As I've explained multiple times on this program, not that I'm, patting myself on the back. Okay, so a couple of things passed. And unfortunately, they passed in the House and the Senate tonight and yesterday, which is not, this is, God, I don't even understand where are we even getting the money for this, to be honest with you. But the Senate went ahead. The House passed that FISA 702 thing last week, or earlier this week. And so the Senate went ahead and passed it. The upper chamber voted right along Democrat lines, of course. And they went ahead and did the upper chamber, voted 60-34 to go ahead and pass the reauthorization of FISA 702. So, hey, if you happen to hear a beep in my audio, like a consistent little beep, it's probably the FBI listening in. Just saying. Just saying on that. Well, we also have a halfway passed, and by halfway, see, a lot of people don't understand in Congress that in order for a bill to pass in Congress, it actually has to pass both houses. I mean, I don't know, anybody that grew up in the Schoolhouse Rock era would have known about this. But, you have a bill, and that bill doesn't really become a bill until one of the houses picks it up. And then once that house picks it up and they pass it, they send it to the other house, meaning if the House of Representatives picks it up and creates it, they send it over to the Senate after it's been approved in the House of Representatives. The Senate then takes it and either approves it as is, or it goes ahead and makes modifications. If it approves it as is, then it can head off to the president to go ahead and either veto or sign. If it needs changing, or something gets changed in the other house, then it goes back to the original house to get looked at and revisited, and whether or not the changes made are accepted. If they're accepted, then of course the bill heads off to the president, and he or she can either veto or sign it. Or if the House doesn't like it and adds their own little special addendums, riders, whatever, that's how our government works. And it just bounces back and forth between the two of them until they come to a consensus and are able to send this off to the president. But the House went ahead and passed a bill, an aid bill, finally. After months of talking about not passing it, the House went ahead and sent it. Now, I say finally, not in joy. I say finally, not in excitement or approval. But I say finally in the fact that it took forever for them to go through this, and I wish it would still take longer. Now, don't get me wrong. I do understand that there is a purpose for us to send aid overseas. Whether I agree with that purpose or not is not necessarily the crux of this conversation. But what it is essentially that these are particular things that might be within America's interest. For an example, according to a lot of people, the war in Ukraine is within America's interest. And in particular, they're talking about Russia just being able to walk all over the top of Ukraine and head right into the capital city of Kyiv. Now, again, keep in mind, there has to be, in my personal opinion, there has to be some benefit for the American people as to why we would want to get involved in something that is overseas. For an example, the whole Israel conflict is within our interests. And the reason why it's in our interests is because of the fact that, one, Israel is an ally, and two, that area, when it goes, pardon the expression, goes nuclear and has problems, our oil goes up because Joe Biden, in particular, hasn't bothered to tap into our resources in order to make things go. Now, that being said, Ukraine probably isn't in the same vein, let's say, as Israel in terms of importance for America. My biggest problem with the whole Ukraine war is the fact that we seem to have hit a stalemate. And by we, I mean the Ukrainians and the Russians seem to have hit a stalemate. Their lines have kind of stabilized, and we haven't really heard a lot out of that war because of the fact that the lines have sort of stabilized. I mean, yeah, you hear about, the Russians attacked this city, or the Ukrainians have, pushed back Russia a little bit on this line. But let's be honest, since the Russians took the Crimea and the Donbass region under the Obama administration, there really hasn't been a whole heck of a lot of change over there. And so my biggest problem is the idea of spending money and just keep spending money and spending money and spending money over and over and over again and getting literally nothing out of it. And what's even worse is that there's no off ramp. There is not a single plan that has been presented to the American public, because Joe Biden is not a foreign policy expert. In fact, Joe Biden has been wrong on every single foreign policy that he has ever been involved in. And that isn't just my opinion. That is historical fact. But check this piece in the Federalist. 2 years and $113 billion later, DC's America Last crew still has no plan for ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, there should have been a plan. There should have been a off-ramp. There should have been peace negotiations being attempted inside and with the two people, or the two entities that are involved. Now, here's the thing. I honestly don't think that Ukraine has the wherewithal nor the ability to actually take back Crimea and the Donbass. I honestly don't think that Russia has the ability to go and jump into Ukraine as long as America keeps funding everything. So pretty much what they have to do, for the most part, is you have to go and make mention to both sides and say, look, you guys really are, all you're doing is just spending a whole bunch of time and money and effort and all this other crap in here for no reason. Let's talk about Russia keeping the area that they've already gotten and already gained, and Ukraine, you just stay where you are. And what's even worse is you have people like, I can't even think of the guy's name. I can think of his face. I'm good. I'm better with faces than I am with names, believe me. But that dumbass talking about how Ukraine is going to be entered into NATO. Now, that obviously is a negative against Russia. That's something that Putin definitely does not want, is for another NATO ally to be along his border. And realistically, I don't see it happening anytime in the near future. In fact, part of the reason, maybe not a big part, but part of the reason for his attack is to basically go and, part of his reasoning for an attack is to make sure that Ukraine doesn't become a NATO country, because if that's the case, then we have the potential of war with all of NATO if Russia keeps attacking them once they get added. And the thing about it is, and no, Outlaw Dogs, it wasn't Vladimir Zelensky. It was our guy. I can't think of his freaking name. It's not Kirby. It's the other dude. Anyway, doesn't really matter because he's a moron anyway. But the point here is that we need to figure out what we're doing, because we're just basically sending money off to Ukraine and there is no oversight. Just as much as sending aid to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, that aid not Hamas, but sending it off to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip where it gets taken by Hamas. That's why I said that. But we're sending aid over to these different countries, and we're not paying attention to what they do with them. We're just sending them pallet loads of cash or munitions or whatever. And we're not asking for an accounting of the money. We're not asking for an accounting of what the munitions are being used for. And so there is no off-ramp right now being defined by the Biden administration because, again, Joe Biden is the worst foreign policy person ever to sit in the White House in modern history. He's been wrong on every single thing. And so to sit here and just keep pouring money, which we don't have, into a black hole, I think is a very inefficient use at best and outright stupid at worst to keep doing. But we go ahead and do it anyway, because for some reason, the bank that is known as America is able to just magically whisk new money out of thin air for what appear to be frivolous things throughout the world. Now, speaking of money, Democrats have talked about how, and we actually got rid of George Santos for essentially, minor transgressions in the long run. But the Republican Party went ahead and got rid of George Santos. And then, of course, you have Bob Menendez, who's done infinitely worse, who the Democrats are hanging on to in their party. And they don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to talk about his clear FARA violations, clear taking of money. I mean, the guy had gold stuffed under his bed, reportedly. Give me a break. That came from a foreign entity that was tracked to that foreign entity. And he's still in Congress today. Well, another one of those just famous Democrats, and the reason why I say they're famous is because of the fact, do you remember that whole Bud Light dust up with the Dylan Mulvaney and everything else? Well, this guy, Ted Lieu, had the audacity to post on the social medias a picture of him holding Bud Light and talking about how he likes to drink Bud Light and everything else. Now, granted, the picture looked a little staged. Yeah. And the picture also looked like he was a little uncomfortable there. But now we have this new report from Red State Ooh, Teddy. You know, anybody that does like political campaigning, there is this entity known as the FEC, which, by the way, the FEC already exonerated Trump on the exact issue that Alvin Bragg is going after him for in New York. But I digress. Ted Lieu, they're not supposed to use campaign money in their private funding, which I seem to recall there's also somebody else too that might have done that. Prosecutor out of Georgia that was accused or potentially going up on being investigated for this exact same thing. I just can't think of her name right off the top of my head. Oh yes, Fannie Willis. Fannie, whatever her freaking name is. Anyway, so Ted Lieu apparently sent money from his campaign to his wife's school board campaign. Now, that isn't the problem, honestly, because you can transfer money from one campaign to another, okay? Provided that that money doesn't come back or is used in a personal fashion. Well, according to this article in Red State, it actually was benefiting Lieu. It was benefiting his kid, and it may have even come back personally. So, since 2019, Red State itself has broken numerous stories about Democrat Representative Ted Lieu's potentially illegal habit of spending campaign funds on expenses that personally benefit him and his family, such as $10,000 to the Torrance Education Foundation, which sponsors his son's robotics team, I should say, $15,000 to his wife's school board campaign, and $50,000 contribution to the university in which his eldest son matriculated a couple of years later, meaning going off to Stanford. Okay. Those stories garnered national attention, but Ted apparently doesn't really care. He kept right on spending money from his donations or donors to these causes without his donors' knowledge or consent. A review of FEC records show that Ted Lieu for Congress has now donated $25,000 to Betty Lieu's school board campaign and $17,000 to the Torrance Education Foundation. In addition, Ted had his political allies funnel contributions to Betty Lieu from their campaign accounts. The amount of these contributions aren't insignificant either. In 2023, nearly every dime received by Betty Lieu for school board was either from Ted Lieu for Congress or the Asian American Forward PAC, which is a PAC funded and controlled by one of Ted's donors. So in other words, what we're talking about here is Ted Lieu, and there's a listing in the report. You can go and take a look at the article. Which, by the way, is in my description of all my videos. You can go and check. I've got links to everything that I present, or won't say everything, most of what I present. But you can see there is a listing of the things that he has been sending off. So, once again, we have a Democrat doing illegal things, and yet the DOJ is probably going to just completely ignore the guy. Just completely ignore him whatsoever for this. I can't imagine what's going on in that head of his at all. All right. So let me take a second and tell you about this fabulous thing that I have involved when you don't want to sit and listen to politics and talk politics, because let's face it, not everybody does it on a regular basis. Okay. But there is wonderful things out there that you can listen to. One of them happens to be True Grit Roots Network Blues. That's right. TGRN Blues which is 24/7, 365 blues artists presented by some fantastic blues artists themselves as our on-air personalities. They have individual and personal views coming from their unique perspective, being part of the blues community, and also presenting blues music all day long. Go over to tgrn.net. That's True Grit Roots Network, tgrn.net. And you can check out not only our personalities, our on-air personalities, but you can also find the link to download our app directly, or you can find us in the Live 365 or catalog of digital radio stations, or even in the IOTC app, AUDACY, IOTC app, or Odyssey is how they pronounce it, but I like to say IOTC so I can remember. It's AUDACY. Go and check out True Grit Roots Network, TGRN Blues. Today, if you're a blues lover, let me tell you, you're going to love the blues. And tomorrow's lineup for anybody who is into starting off your Sunday in a gospel mood, you can head off and listen to some of our fantastic artists, our on-air personalities that put together a specific gospel sound on Monday, starting off with my friend Oogie on Oogie's Porch to Pew. And then following him, we have Lady A's. That's right, the Lady A of internet fame and blues history. The Lady A's Gumbo and Gospel follows the Porch to Pew sound. So you can listen to both and get yourself right with the Lord using the blues. Go and check us out at tgrn.net out of Austin, Texas. That's True Grit Roots Network, TGRN Blues. Once again, that's out of Austin, Texas. Check us out on tgrn.net. Okay, let's move on to Biden. Now, here's something that I just don't understand. I really don't. And being male, maybe this is part of the reason why I can't quite figure this out. But the Democrats keep pushing the whole abortion thing. The Democrats think that abortion is going to actually, save them from the bleeding that they're getting right now from people of color, young folks, and that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. Is that the Democrat Party, by putting in things like men in women's sports, men in women's spaces and bathrooms, and so on and so forth. And I'm talking biological men here that are going into these spaces, okay, just because they happen to claim to be the opposite sex. This is a question as to why. Well, check this article out in Red State. Biden has gutted Trump-era Title IX, issues rules to protect LGBTQ students, and eliminate gender-based categories. Now, I understand protecting, the LGBTQ folks. I get that. There is because let's face it, there are some people who really are backwards in some of their thinking, okay? But the one thing that I don't get is how the Democrat Party seems to think that by advocating for abortion, that's going to save women when they can't even, by their own admission, define what a woman is. And that they are sitting here saying that a woman and a man have the exact same physical characteristics to where they can actually compete against each other in very physical sports, such as UFC fighting, boxing, etc. Even in non-contact sports, such as swimming, as Riley Gaines, who is a huge advocate for making sure that women keep their sports, okay, even as she testified in front of Congress and basically said, I am a world-class woman swimmer. I compete at a very high level in the collegiate world. But my husband, who is also a collegiate swimmer, can beat me twice on Sundays and every day of the week. Even Venus Williams, and this came out in that same hearing. Even Venus Williams couldn't beat the 200th ranked tennis player in the male division. And she, honestly, is at the top of her game. Or at least, well, I mean, maybe not so much now, but she was at the top of her game when that, pretty much when that occurred. I mean, everybody pretty much knows that men have scientifically proven physical characteristics that can defeat even the best of the women. And yet Joe Biden and the Biden administration has decided to take and we're not even talking adults here. We're talking Title IX, which is school kids. We're talking high school sports. We're talking collegiate sports, where these young men and women and teenagers are having to be placed in spaces with biological males. It's not just the sports themselves. This elimination also includes things like locker rooms, bathrooms, etc. Now, for those of you who may recall, I know I'm maybe a little young for this particular part of the discussion, but there was a reason why Title IX exists today. And that was because of the fact that there really wasn't women's sports back in the day. And they ended up fighting and getting it on the books, the Title IX protections, to make sure that they had their own spaces, that they had the ability to compete in sports the same level of competition in terms of, their sports or their chosen activities. And to sit here and to tear that down, okay, to sit here and tear that down just indicates how little the Democrats care about females and women and young girls. Because think of this. You can open up just about any news outlet anywhere and you can find a story where a male has dominated in a traditionally female-only organization. All you have to do is look at our look at the things like Woman of the Year as an example. Woman of the Year has been, people like Caitlyn Jenner, a biological male who has taken a woman's place. And it's not even that, but many of these girls and women are in these sports because they are trying to gain things like college scholarships. And they, like someone like Riley Gaines, who got a scholarship to go to the university, I believe it's the University of Pennsylvania. I'm sure Outlaw Dogs will correct me if I'm wrong on that. But she got a scholarship in swimming to go there. If you remove these protections for these women, now all you have to have is a male who identifies as a woman, and they're going to gain all of the scholarships. They're going to gain all of the advantages that used to be protected under Title IX that are no longer protected, that are no longer there, because Biden has decided to go and gut some things that even Trump put into place, by the way. in order to protect women in these sports. And they're going to do this, and they're going to continue to do this, yet they claim to be the protectors of women just because they happen to support abortion. And just real quick, as I expected, Outlaw Dogs corrected me. She's not at the University of Pennsylvania. She is at the University of Kentucky. Riley's College is at the University of Kentucky. I was wrong on that. All right. How many of you can remember? We're going to switch topics here just a little bit. How many of you can remember when talk radio actually started? Like, really, really remember when AM talk radio took over. Now, for those of you that may not remember, I mean, I have a vague recollection of kind of when it became sort of this phenomenon. It all happened when the development of FM radio came into play. And what ended up happening is, so for those of you who may not get technical, I'm going to try and just help you to understand this. AM radio uses a methodology to make it to where the radio device translates the signal coming in from the air from AM to FM. And AM is amplitude modulation, FM is frequency modulation, okay? And AM, for the longest time, was the king in radio. The reason being is because AM could actually transmit a lot farther than FM could. There was, a whole bunch of scientific and technological reasons for that, but generally speaking, FM itself was sort of relegated to the music because you could get a higher quality sound out of it versus AM radio, which oftentimes doesn't have quite the same quality. And so what ended up happening is, because radio itself was sort of catering to music. Now, granted, it had been spoken word prior to that, but when music really started to hit, especially in rock and that kind of stuff, people started listening to radio for the music and not so much for news and commentary and those kinds of things. And so for a while there, AM radio started to kind of die out. And then all of a sudden, there was this guy who came out and reinvigorated AM radio. That guy, who has been dubbed as radio's greatest of all time, Rush Limbaugh, reinvigorated AM radio and the talk radio format. And one of the things that happened, of course, was the fact that AM radio and the conservative movement started taking over. And so the FCC came up with this idea that there was a a neutrality that had to happen, meaning that for as many, we'll call them personalities on AM radio and talk radio that you needed to have on one side of the aisle. Now you had to have the other side of the aisle equally represented. And so this radio station came out and started, known as NPR. And NPR, which everybody knew, National Public Radio, they started to cater to the left side of the aisle, whereas talk radio by itself mostly catered to the right side of the aisle. The left side of the aisle had NPR, and NPR started taking off. It was a publicly funded endeavor. Well, recently, we just had a huge shakeup. Now, publicly funded generally means that you should being the key word, should have an equal representation. It is supposed to be neutral. It is not supposed to be leaning left or right, but it is supposed to be in the middle. One of the things that just came out is the fact that NPR and one of its producers came out as a whistleblower and got fired for it too, by the way, but basically said that no, NPR is actually left-leaning, dare I say, propaganda. Well, there's a bill that has been introduced. This piece coming from Town Hall. There is a bill introduced to defund the liberal NPR. And as that, they were called low-grade propaganda. So Jim Banks introduced this bill to prohibit taxpayer funding from benefiting the Democrat and woke-dominated broadcast and online news outlet known as NPR. The Defund NPR Act is exactly what it sounds like. Now, this is the kind of bill that I could actually get behind, not because of the subject, but listen to this. It's a 2-page bill. That's it. Just 2 pages. That's it. And it says, and I quote, after the date of the enactment of this act, no federal funds may, directly or indirectly, be made available to be used or support, or to be used to support an organization described in subsection B as National Public Radio and any successor, including through the payment of dues to or the purchase of programming from such organization by a public broadcast station using federal funds received by such station. Now, the NPR's new CEO, which I'll get to her in just a minute, is a radical left-wing activist who doesn't believe in free speech or objective journalism, Banks emphasized in a statement provided to Town Hall. Hoosiers, I don't know what he means by that, but Hoosiers shouldn't be writing her paychecks. So NPR got a new chief. Her name is Catherine Marr. And according to Banks, she isn't qualified to teach an introductory journalism class, much less capable of responsibly spending millions of Americans' tax dollars. NPR was a liberal loony bin under the last CEO, John Lansing, and now it's about to get even nuttier, he says. It's time to pull the plug on this national embarrassment. Congress must stop spending other people's hard-earned money on low-grade propaganda, according to Banks. Now, a 25-year veteran, and this is kind of what spurs this, a 25-year veteran of NPR, Uri Berliner, wrote in the Free Press that an open-minded spirit no longer exists within NPR, and now predictively, we don't have an audience that reflects America. That wouldn't be a problem for any opening polemical news outlet serving a niche audience, he noted. But for NPR, which purports to consider all things, it's devastating for both its journalism and its business model. This absence of viewpoint diversity, Berliner explained, has been the most damaging development in NPR's slide into inanity. Now, again, keep in mind, this is different. NPR is different than NPR. So CNN as an organization is a for-profit company. It is not backed by donated dollars. It's not backed by federal grants. It's not backed by federal money. It is a privately owned corporation. And so CNN, which has been, dubbed many different things, but which was originally called the Cable News Network, but now is called more likely the Clinton News Network, has essentially taken public funds. When you take public funds, you cannot differentiate or discriminate against the opposing side. It's supposed to be a fair and balanced kind of scenario. And so this thing taking off and doing this is a bit of a scary situation. I approve of this. I actually do. There's another organization that I also think should no longer take federal funding, and that is Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood should also not be getting federal funding, which, if I would have been able to get to the article, they took over $700 million in public funds right after Roe v. Wade got overturned by the Dobbs decision. But still, when we're talking about NPR just pulled in this woman, Catherine, blowing my mind here, Catherine Marr. She did a TED Talk. You should probably check it out, but she did a TED Talk where she talks about truth and how truth actually doesn't really matter. That what matters is perception of truth. Well, just to kind of give you a real quick overview of her, she actually comes from Wikimedia, which is the parent company to Wikipedia, which people all think is the all-seeing, all-knowing orb of knowledge. And it actually has been chosen by many, many scholastic organizations as a very unreliable source. In fact, James Woods was even talking about it on X, where he tried to correct some clear inaccuracies within Wikipedia about him, and he was unable to do it. So if Wikipedia is any indication as to where this woman is going to end up taking NPR, I totally agree with the gentleman trying to defund them. They do not need public funding at all. They need to literally go away. All right. So I've got, this is going to be kind of a big one. So I'm going to go ahead and do this really quick. Let me wet my whistle again with this fantastic wild turkey that I was gifted, which thank you very much. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So let's get on to tonight's question of the week. All right. And tonight's question of the week was submitted by Buddy Weiser out of the Rumble Land. Thank you, sir, of course. Buddy writes, "Greetings to you. I hope this finds you well and with stout spirits today." Yes, I do have stout spirits. "I continue to enjoy your presentations. I have a few inquiries for you. Would you please provide some background information on James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, birthplace, education, etc., and the relationship between these two legendary patriots? Thanks, Buddy Weiser." All right. So anyone who remembers U.S. history and civics, okay, we did have two fantastic founding fathers in both of these gentlemen. Let's go ahead and we'll start with James Madison. James Madison actually did become president of the United States at one point. And he was born right around, well, they called out March 16th, but they also say March 5th because apparently there was a calendar change or something in the past that caused that to change. So anyway, he was born in Port Conway, Virginia in 1751. He died subsequently on June 28th, 1836 in Montpelier, Virginia. He was the fourth president of the United States and one of the founding fathers. He attended the Constitutional Convention in 1787, and he influenced the planning and the ratification of the U.S. Constitution as we know it today. Now, his connection to Alexander Hamilton, outside of attending the Constitutional Convention, both he and Hamilton, as well as John Jay, published this collection of articles that were written in the Federalist newspaper that is now known as the Federalist Papers. There's 85 of these missives. And if you want to know which ones Hamilton wrote about, Madison wrote about, I'm trying to remember. I think it was either Hamilton. No, it was Hamilton. Hamilton wrote the ones that are to Publius. Madison actually wrote under his normal name. Now, Madison actually came from a little bit of money. His father was a landowner and a squire. He grew up near the Blue Ridge Mountains, and in 1769, he actually rode by horseback to the College of New Jersey, which is now called Princeton University, and he completed the 4-year course that was over there, by the way, that he completed that 4-year course in 2 years. So he actually was highly educated in law. He had, unfortunately, he had a epilepsy, I think, or epileptoid hysteria is what they called it back then. And that thwarted him. And again, this is Madison, that thwarted him from any kind of military training, but it didn't prevent him from studying public law. So he had essentially today what would be considered a law degree. But he definitely was an advocate for not only the church itself, because even though he was a church member, he never actually really expressed any particular church except for the preference for what is called Unitarianism. That was his religious background. Now, after his health improved, he was elected to Virginia's 1776 Revolutionary Convention, where he actually drafted the state's guarantee of religious freedom. So he actually is the responsibility of he's actually responsible for the idea of religious freedom in America. The convention then turned legislature. He actually helped Thomas Jefferson de-establish the church, but lost re-election by refusing to furnish the electors with free whiskey. So apparently you could buy off electors back then. But anyway, he spent 2 years at the governor's council and then was sent to the Continental Congress in March of 1780. Now, when he went to the Continental Congress, that's actually where he met up with some of the other wonderful founding fathers like Alexander Hamilton. Now, just to describe Madison really quickly, he was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed only about 100 pounds. He was small-boned, had a very boyish appearance, he was described, and was weak of voice. In fact, he waited 6 months before being able to take the floor and talk about his strong actions and beliefs. He rose quickly to leadership and, of course, eventually went on to talk about peace negotiations, contending for the establishment of the Mississippi as a Western territorial boundary. He fought for the right to navigate the river through its Spanish-held delta. He defended Virginia's charter title to the vast Northwest against states that had no claim to the Western territories and whose motive was to validate barrel of rum purchases from Indian tribes. Madison also spent time defeating land speculators by persuading Virginia to actually code the Western lands to Congress as national heritage. So he spent a lot of time fighting in the law. In terms of Alex Hamilton, so let's switch over to him. So Alexander Hamilton, by contrast, actually grew up in what would be considered a poor family. He wasn't from money at all. In fact, his mom and dad divorced originally. His mother was actually a divorcee, I should say, of a German or possibly a Danish merchant. James Hamilton, his father, went ahead and abandoned the family. Destitute, his mother set up a small shop. Mother Rachel set up a small shop. At the age of 11, Alexander went to work. He became a clerk in the counting house of two New York merchants who recently established themselves. When his mom died in 1768, Alexander became the ward of his mother's relatives, and in 1772, his ability, industry, and engaging manners won him advancement from bookkeeper to manager. His friends later then sent him to a preparatory school in Elizabethtown, New Jersey. And in the autumn of 1773, he entered King's College, which is known as Columbia now. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, he was described as being intensely ambitious, and he became a very serious and successful student, but his studies were interrupted by the brewing revolt against Great Britain. So he was actually fairly young. He publicly defended the Boston Tea Party, in which the Boston colonists, we've talked about that before, destroyed several tea cargoes in defiance of the tea tax. In 1774 and 1775, he wrote 3 influential pamphlets which upheld the agreements of the Continental Congress on the non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation of British products, and attacked British policy in Quebec. Those anonymous publications, one of them was actually attributed to John Jay and John Adams, gave the first solid evidence of Hamilton's desire, of course, to be part of the American Revolution. So he ended up going, and because he had the ability to go and fight the war, in March of 1776, through influence of his friends as a part of the New York legislature, Hamilton was commissioned as a captain in the provincial artillery, and he organized his own company. And at the Battle of Trenton, where he and his men prevented the British under Lord Cornwallis from crossing the Raritan River and attacking George Washington's main army, he showed conspicuous bravery. In February of 1777, George Washington actually invited him to become an aide-de-camp with the rank of lieutenant colonel. He spent 4 years in Washington's staff, and he grew close to Washington and was entrusted with his correspondence. So just to kind of move on a little bit, there's a lot more about this where he actually marries into money, into one of New York's most distinguished families. But he ended up, for his political activities, he sent letters to a member of Congress and to Robert Morris. Hamilton analyzed the financial and political weaknesses of the existing government. In November of 1781, with the war virtually over, he moved to Albany, where he studied law and was admitted to practice on July of 1782. He joined the New York legislature, and they elected him to the Continental Congress, where, of course, he ran into and encountered James Madison. He began to practice law in New York City in 1783. He defended, a bunch of people. I'm not going to go too far into this, but he drew up the draft of the address to the states, which emerged from the Constitutional Convention that met in Philadelphia in May of 1787. So he obviously, as well as Madison, were very critical of the Articles of Confederation, and that's part of the reason why they are okay, Outlaw Dogs, I'll do that. And yes, Mark, I do see your comments showing up. But anyway, they both actually, like I said, with John Jay, were instrumental in the arguments and the essays that they wrote for the Federalist Papers. That's probably, outside of the Constitution itself, that's probably the most major impact that they had on the American Revolution and on the American history. So anyway, you can go and take a look and look at them, but that's where they kind of got together about it. And unfortunately, Alexander Hamilton himself was actually killed in a duel, a very famous duel, by Aaron Burr. Everybody, I'm pretty sure anybody who's a history buff had heard about that. But both Hamilton and Madison were strong champions of the whole idea of a strong central government. However, both of them also knew that the strong central government needed to be restrained. And so that's probably one of the things that bonded them together with it. And I'm also being told by one of my rumblers that apparently in August 4th, 1790, Alexander Hamilton helped create, or was also known as, the father of the Coast Guard. So he helped create the Coast Guard, which of course we didn't really have a Navy back then. So that's probably, anyway, hopefully that was entertaining for you. And buddy, hopefully that answered some of your questions. I know I could go on all night on just something like this, but we don't have that opportunity, and I'm already over time. So I will let you guys go. I'm laughing at a freaking moronic joke, or a moron over on YouTube. Anyway, I will let you guys go. Do me a favor, if you want your question for Whiskey, or don't forget Pet of the Week on Wednesday. Pet of the Week, I don't have anything this week, so if you have a pet that you would like featured, please go ahead and submit it to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. You can do that for your pledges of allegiance, as well as the Pet of the Week and Question of the Week. We will see you guys all on Wednesday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the American Perspective broadcast channel. Hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.